Good evening, everybody who is online today for the final session of this week-long series of webinars uh, from the India March for Science, which started on 3rd of August and it's ending today, which is 9th. So this has been, an event that's happening for the last 4 years, and has drawn, thousands of scientists, science communicators, and science, loving people at large into its fold for demands or aspirations of greater funding or greater scope for dissemination of science and scientific information, etc. Just to share a few bits of facts before we get on with a very exciting webinar with experts from the media who are joining us today. I'd just like to call out that the India March for Science units across the country in about 16 states today have been conducting webinars, poster fests, and in fact, we also had asked people to share some 1-minute videos on why they would think, there are thousands of people who have watched our webinars in the past few days. So we asked them to make 1-minute videos on what they think is on the top of their mind concerning science and society, or why they think a movement like this is very relevant for our country today. And I'm very happy to say that there's been a very heartening response from both the public at large, and especially we've had some kids do some wonderful posters, which you could see in our Facebook pages. So that's I would like to call out that the pandemic has been a bad thing, and we have been under bad situation in various aspects. But one positive thing that I would like to call out is that the response to the webinars like this that we're conducting has been immense. Our viewership has grown dramatically in the last few days. We have had, specifically from the India March for Science unit of Karnataka, we have had about 9 webinars since 3rd of August, about 20 speakers covering science and research, medicine, academia, and now media. It's been watched by thousands of people. So that's one useful or the positive aspect of the pandemic. Hope the interest that we have seen continues, subsequently is what I would expect. So before we start with our speakers, I would introduce them, and they're going to cover various dimensions of the media, which is electronic, print, and social media, the rich experience in this area. So before that, I would like to call our admin Anand Raj to just play a small video of a minute and a half, covering what's done in the last 4 years, and also the issues that we intend to highlight in the background of the pandemic this year. Anand, over to you. I think there is an issue with audio, Anand. That's fine. We could continue. That's okay. Yeah, thank you. There was a bit of an audio issue, but this video is always available on our Facebook page. So those of you interested can access it later. Let me move on to our speakers, who are from the domain of media today. Let me start with a charismatic Indian science communicator who is with us. We are honored to have him today in this webinar, Mr. Pallava Bagla. Many of you, may know him, and it may be superfluous for me to really introduce him, but still, it's my duty to really say a few words. He is respected for his deep understanding of the country's science and technology system. He has won many national and international awards for his work. Explaining the complexities of science in a simple language is his forte. His pioneering work showcasing India's missions to Mars and Moon has been applauded. That's here in the English and Hindi for New Delhi television, which is NDTV, and also online. In his over 2 decades of writing for the prestigious American weekly Science, for which he is still a correspondent, his stories have highlighted India to the world. He has won 3 national awards for his science writing, and in 2010 was awarded the David Ehrman Award for Excellence in Science Journalism, considered as the Oscar of science journalism and given by the American Geophysical Union, Washington, D.C. For his landmark writings, which exposed the Himalayan glacier plundered by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, as some of you would know. He runs a regular photo blog on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram titled Enjoy Nature, and used to pen a weekly column on SMT for the Press Trust of India (PTI) and has authored several books. In fact, he is the photographer for the world's top photo agency, Getty Images. His YouTube channel, New Frontiers in Science and Development, is very popular. In fact, I am also a follower of his Twitter handle. Author of several books, he has also served as the Sri Raman Pai Chair Visiting Professor in Science Communication at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bengaluru, from where you and I hail from, which resulted in the book. This is an important thing, this is available on Amazon right now, Bridging the Communication Gap in Science and Technology. It's a masterpiece, Lessons from India. It is edited by Mr. Pallava Bagla and Mr. V.V. Binoy and published by Springer in 2017. He served as the president of the International Science Writers Association and was a member of the executive board of the World Federation of Science Journalists. So that's a brief overview of the man with many feathers to his cap. So with that few small introduction, I'll hand over to Mr. Pallava Bagla. Over to you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Satish, and welcome Archis to this very interesting webinar on how you and I can play a role in increasing the scientific temper. As a journalist, my job is to report the news. Anything which comes as creation of scientific temper is only as an offshoot. My job is really not to create the scientific temper. My job is to report the news to the people, which is what I try and do every day as we go along. I think you mentioned about some of my work, which is very nice of you when you introduced. Let me show to the people the main thing which you spoke about. This is the book, Bridging the Communication Gap in Science and Technology. This was a book I did when I was at the National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bengaluru, and this book has been published by Springer, and this is easily available on all online stores. And 3 years ago, when it came out, we made several recommendations to the government. The March for Science is...
Mr. Bagla, there is some audio issue.
Book, and I remember
Mr. Bagla, there is some audio issue.
In covering the first March of Science when it was taken out in Delhi. So the book asked for several recommendations, and the government of India, in its wisdom, has implemented most of those. So, somewhere, in my opinion, uh, the current dispensation is inclined to help in science communication and is inclined to make sure that the message which is there from the science and technology community goes out. And I can name here, on repeated occasions, I have seen the current Science Minister, Dr. Harshvardhan, the Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology, Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, the Principal Scientific Advisor, Dr. K. Vijayaraghavan, the other secretary also, all are very keen that the message goes out to the people.
Sorry, Mr. Bagla, can you hear me?
I have never seen an atmosphere where science communication is given such a positive look. Now, many people would say that this current dispensation, which is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi led NDA government, is not very inclined towards science and sometimes talks a little bit about obscurantism and talks about more going into traditional knowledge systems, etc. Unfortunately, that there are fringe elements which certainly do it, but the mainstream certainly is inclined towards science communication. Now let's come down to the current situation which we are going through, which is the pandemic which the country is facing, the COVID-19 pandemic. In this COVID-19 pandemic, uh, from day one, it has been announced that several things were required. And by and large, I have been very active throughout the lockdown, through the unlock phase, etc.
Yeah, friends, just bear with us for a minute. Mr. Bagla is, going to join us in a small, maybe 30 seconds. So please bear with us.
Can you see me now? Am I audible?
Yeah. This is better. Yes. Great.
Okay.
It
I
was
am not
audible.
able
Yeah.
to hear you. Let me continue.
Sure.
I was saying, in this current government, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi led NDA government, there has been a certain push towards getting science communication right. And that seems to be a subject which many people kind of differ, but I have always felt that the government, including the minister, the secretaries, are very, very keen that we get the science communication aspects right. Having said that, I was talking about the current situation which we are facing, which is the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic. Uh, I I am a journalist. I was allowed to move around by law during the lockdown phase, during the severest of the lockdown phase, and during the unlock phase. So I have continued to work out on the streets, out everywhere where I needed to do during this pandemic as well. What I saw on the roads is something very interesting. What I saw was that people, when asked to go under lockdown, complied with the lockdown. By and large, 99% of the people, in my opinion, remained under lockdown during the first 30, 54, or the 68 days. When the government gave a mandate that people wear masks, even now, if you see, by and large, people are wearing masks in the country. Now, compare this to this situation to what is happening, say, in other parts of the world, and let's take the most advanced country, which is considered America, and you would see both the compliance on mask and compliance on lockdown was very feeble. In fact, the response from the leadership in both countries, which is India and America, one can see has been vastly different. So, in a way, even the coronavirus pandemic to me showed that somewhere when messaging is done right, people do follow the instructions. And it gives an impression that the larger Indian community, the larger Indian public is inclined to listen to voices of scientists, inclined to listen to voices of medical practitioners, provided they they are genuine and provided they are uh, giving advice which people think would be important for them. So both the during the pandemic and post-pandemic, if you see, the response in India has been fairly good, and in my opinion, one of the reasons why we are seeing a low fatality rate and a relatively lower number of cases of corona in India is thanks to some of our very healthy practices which India has. And let me highlight some of them. And people would say this is going a little beyond science, but today, during the pandemic, uh, it's modern science which has failed the global human community. There are no drugs, there are no vaccines. So, what have we adopted? Good old ways of public health. So, some of the practices which we have in India, one of the best practices which we have is doing namaskar and namaste, or doing adab. These are practices where we don't touch each other. Very, very healthy practices from the point of view of public health. Before we sit down to eat, we normally wash our hands. We also practice other healthy things for which have helped in keeping the spread of infection much lower. So there are several things which emerge from deep Indian tradition but have deep scientific value, and they have helped us in this very trying times of the coronavirus pandemic. But that does not mean that things have not gone wrong. Certainly, things have gone wrong. The lockdown itself, uh, could it have been avoided? Uh, the lockdown certainly took care of the spread of the. It did not help. It helped in controlling the spread of the infection, but it also broke the economy in a very bad way. So today, during the lockdown, the number of cases were going up, the economy was going down. And today, the deep impact we see on the economy is a consequence of the lockdown. So we need to look at the consequences of the lockdown. Did it, in the final measure, help the country? Was it as necessary, as severe as it was? Uh, Delhi was among the first states, and I'm speaking from Delhi, which came out of the lockdown. And the chief minister of Delhi said, living with the coronavirus is the only option. And that is what we have seen. So, in conclusion, I would say uh, the vast Indian public, uh, many people say they are illiterate, they may be uh, not well versed in scientific facts, but by and large, they understand and comprehend what is told to them and are very educated about many things. So I have great faith in the Indian system, in the Indian nation, and I hope that as time goes on, India invests more in science and technology. Currently, we are investing less than 1% of the GDP in science and technology. We should be increasing it to 2 or 3% if we have to become, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been repeatedly asking during the pandemic, to become Atmanirbhar or self-reliant. Self-reliant and Atmanirbharta will come when we start investing heavily in our own science and technology institutions. And we need to see that happening very soon. Otherwise, some of these may remain just slogans and may not pan out to be actual facts. Uh, but I repeat, I have great faith in India, Indian public, and the 1.3 billion population, which to me represents a very enlightened and audience which listens carefully to messages when given by experts. And they have a lot of faith in the Indian scientific, medical, and the technical communities. Uh, so I am very hopeful that the scientific temper, as there is no specific definition for scientific temper, but by and large, people will listen to good science messages and take them to heart. And I rest my case here, and I would be happy to answer any questions which may come later. Thanks a lot, Satish, and thanks a lot, Archis, for listening in. I have many times heard from people in Book Live, and you guys are doing a very good job of trying to correct occasionally, or I shouldn't say just occasionally now, many times when things go wrong. Many times in the journalistic circle, we find it difficult because we are looking at news to try and correct what is disinformation.
Try our best.
So I think uh, you folks are doing a marvelous job and do continue doing that.
Thank you. We are trying our best. It is difficult indeed.
So, thank you, Mr. Bagla, for a very interesting opening remarks. So I'll move to Mr. Archis Chowdhury. As Mr. Bagla rightly pointed out, he belongs to the new tribe of people who are very relevant today. He comes from Boom FactCheck, one of the premier fact-checking initiatives in the country. Today's topic, which is about the role of media in disseminating scientific temper, public information of science, but also very importantly to give information and fight at the same time misinformation, or as Mr. Bagla said, disinformation, which often also has an intent, as people say. So that's even another pandemic that we are fighting today, along with the COVID-19. So that's where I think Archis become very relevant for this discussion. Just a brief about Archis is he's a reporter and a fact checker with Boom Fact Check or Boom Live, if you have seen the Twitter handle. Apart from the usual fact checks, he also dives deep into the world of misinformation to fish out trends and insights on the fake news ecosystem in India to understand how to better fight against fake news. Since the pandemic started, Archis and the Boom team have been tracking misinformation very closely and have published two short studies based on an analysis of the overall body of work done by Boom. And he would love to share the findings with you with some tips. And this is very important. on what users like you and me could do to help fact checkers in this continuous fight for truth. So, over to you, Archis.
Thank you, Satish, for the introduction, and thank you, Mr. Bagla, for starting off the discussion. So I will share. I have a PowerPoint presentation for you guys, so I'm going to share that. All right. I think you guys can see it. Is it okay, Satish? Is it working?
Yeah, just waiting. So, yeah, it's loading. Yeah, we can
Okay.
see now.
Okay, you can see the presentation, right?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. Can you hear me? The audio is fine?
Absolutely. You're good.
Okay, cool.
Audio.
So, yeah, so I'll start now. So, I'm sure all of you have been hearing about this term fake news. It's been on for a while, maybe since 2016. But this has been there for a while, and if there's something that this pandemic has shown us, is that this phenomenon is far from over. It's in fact just getting started. Like there are dark times coming in terms of fake news and our capabilities in figuring out what is real and what is not. So I'll just start off with just simple, what is fake news. So there are two different ways this term is used. The first is to discredit the media. For example, you hear Donald Trump saying, "Oh, this is fake news," whenever he refers to an article by New York Times that he doesn't like. Or you can use this term to talk about a piece of information that is meant to mimic reality but is actually false. But both of these, they work in different ways, but for the same goal. It's to confuse you, basically. So if you come across a bunch of information, it's very hard for you to tell what's real and what's not. There's always a sense of mistrust on these kind of information. So at the end of the day, what you do is you always go for the information that seems more believable, and that's where we fall into a trap. So let's talk about fake news in India. For a long time, we have been talking about media literacy, about education. We've been saying that it's mostly people who are not educated. It's mostly people who don't know how to use these gadgets. All these new people suddenly have these gadgets, so they're sharing so much fake news. So a bunch of researchers at London School of Economics, they were given some money to do a study in India to figure out who would share the most amount of misinformation, especially, and they were looking at misinformation that leads to violence, dangerous misinformation. So we are talking about the times when there were a series of lynchings based on these WhatsApp rumors. So this is what they find out. Who shares the most fake news? Educated people more than non-educated. Privileged people than people who are not less privileged. People who are more tech savvy, and men. So obviously these results are really apart from what we thought. And the more they shared this study with us, the more we realized is that these are the people who feel confident to actually share fake news, and especially when it comes to disinformation. So misinformation is when you share a piece of information, fake news, when you actually believe in it and you fall for it and you share it. Disinformation is when you have a little more of a mischief in mind and you want to purposefully share a piece of fake news. That is disinformation. And these are the kind of people who are more likely to rally and create these WhatsApp groups because they're tech savvy. They know how to do this. They create this work, and the incentives can be different. They can be either be paid or they can be other incentives. But they do this. They have the capabilities, and the more educated they are, the higher the scale is of them doing it, because the more resources you have, the more capabilities you have. So in their whole study, they found that prejudice was the biggest reason for sharing fake news. And basically, it plays a major role in our lives as well, in terms of what kind of information we accept, and that's confirmation bias. We are always looking for information to confirm our pre-existing beliefs. And this is our biggest vulnerability, especially when it comes to fake news. So let's come down to the pandemic, this coronavirus pandemic, and like this surge of misinformation that we have seen. And the WHO, they call it an infodemic, as you might have heard it, because it's kind of all over the world. So we at Boom, what we did was, when we saw that this became basically most of our work, and we were looking at fake news related to coronavirus so much, that we thought we are going to analyze them, collect all our fact checks. So we started checking right from January, the first month that we saw any fake news regarding coronavirus. So initially it was about China, coronavirus infected. These are the words. So we collected the claims, the fake claims that we saw, and we made word clouds out of it. And these were the words for January. This was the word cloud for February. This was March, and this was April. As you see, it developed kind of in a way that is unprecedented or unbelievable, but not for us though. Like the term Muslim appears a lot in April, and it's because as we move on from March to April, we suddenly see this new trend. Most of the COVID related misinformation were actually targeting Muslims for deliberately spreading the virus. And this was a direct consequence of the fallout of the Tablighi Jamaat incident that happened in Nizamuddin in New Delhi. But all of these allegations were based on repurposed videos, or like old videos being shared of people spitting on food with claims that, oh look, this is what's happening now, and they're spreading the coronavirus. Some of those videos were not even from India, and some of them had no link to the COVID-19 pandemic. As you see, this was quite a worrying trend, and it is something that we have seen before as well, even during the CAA protests, during the abrogation of 370, and this was, although expected, but this is quite worrying in general, you could say. So what we learned from this analysis is that fake news usually responds to the actual news cycle. They're very responsive. The more shocking the events are, the more fake news it will inspire. And if those events have some kind of visuals, if there's a major explosion, or if there's a lot of violence, of say there's a lynching and there's a video of a lynching that went out, these videos are quite dangerous. They can be repurposed and shared and used out of context again and again. And there's no end to it, because like these videos are so shocking. They're very useful for these kind of for this ecosystem, basically, to incite some kind of feeling among people. Also, cultural biases play a major role in us spreading misinformation, and why that is because
Archis, small. It looks like the slides are not moving. So there is your feedback that the slides are not moving. So it's still on slide 1.
Okay, I think. Wait, let me. Sorry. I think I have to stop my screen and share it again.
Not a problem.
So basically, the presentation didn't start.
Yeah, if you could go to slide 2, I can confirm if it's moving.
Okay, sorry. I think I just kept going on without the slides. Okay, can you see now?
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah, not a problem.
Okay.
You can continue. I think you are clear, so that's okay.
Okay, I was clear. Right? Okay, I'll start off from here. So I talked about all of this. So these are word clouds I spoke about. These are basically our stories from Jan to April. And now coming to my present point, basically, how culture influences our beliefs. And that is where our vulnerabilities lie. Basically, when we are faced with so much information that it's hard for us to choose what is real and what's not, we always end up choosing the ones or accepting the ones that go with our beliefs. And really, this is the point where we let go of our verification process. I mean, this is true for me, this is true for you, and this is true for everybody else. It doesn't matter what your background is, how scientifically you think, you will always fall prey to this. And this is confirmation bias, basically. And keeping this in mind, where does the future lie? Well, it will only get worse, because if we can't correct this behavior of ours, we can only keep this in mind and act accordingly. Because what we are going to face with ahead is something called micro-targeting, or specifically political micro-targeting. And to explain this, I would like to go back to 2018, to the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where there was a major data breach from Facebook, and this firm called Cambridge Analytica used all these Facebook users' data, and they started creating very personalized campaigns to target these people and identify people who are kind of undecided on the elections. And this was for the US elections and for Brexit. And they targeted them constantly with specific kind of messaging and with fake news to shift their perception towards a specific side to their favor, basically to the favor of the people who were paying them. So basically, at that time, the Donald Trump campaign was going on, and there was a lot of confusion among people as to whom to vote for, and they use this confusion basically, and they manipulated people. So another big monster that we're waiting for is deep fakes, basically AI generated doctored videos and images, and because they are basically expected to become so real that it would be basically impossible for the naked eyes to just tell what is real and what's not, what is edited and what is doctored. At this point, any doctored video we see, we can usually tell because it's pixelated, it's bad quality and superimposed. You can tell that. But with deep fakes, that's going to be harder. And because we rely so much on visuals, especially on videos now, that it's going to be really hard for us to make out, whether it's really a deep fake or not. And for all the people who already fall prey to fake news, let's just say this is going to make things a lot worse for these people, and for all of us. Imagine a video. I mean, right now you have a political slander, for example, in 2020 or 2019 is you take an image of a politician, for example, say an image of Rahul Gandhi, take a little silly image of him, maybe winking or doing something funny, and you put a text next to him of and making it seem like it's a quote of his, and share it, and we see a lot of these kind of texts. It seems like he said it, we share it, we make fun, we add captions. Now imagine the same thing. Rahul Gandhi comes in the video and says something really outrageous, and this video is shared, and it will seem extremely real to you, and it will be impossible to tell whether it's really him or a deep fake. So yes, it's kind of dangerous. And we, all of the fact checkers around the world, are working with a lot of tech companies in figuring out that once deepfakes do come out, how we are going to fight this. So keeping all of this in mind, we can come down to this part now, what you can do as users. Of course, as I said, your vulnerabilities lie in your beliefs. So the first thing you should do is question. You question everything, you question information, and have this basic habit of not just accepting any information you find, and being aware of the fact that there is misinformation out there. There's basically more misinformation than real information out there, and especially if you're really looking for information on social media, Facebook and WhatsApp, anything except from WhatsApp, always question, don't believe it. And once you do that, you question even more and you don't stop. And a little kind of hint I would give you, a little trick, is if an information seems believable, you should question it even more. In fact, the more believable it'll seem, the more you should question it. Because if an information doesn't seem believable, then by nature you will question it. So because we try to reject, or we try to question things that don't go according to our beliefs, but we don't treat other information, the information that goes according to our beliefs, the same way. So we should hold all of those information in the same light. Everything needs to be verified. And I know in the scientific community, this is something which is very commonly done, especially when you treat information like scientific information. Everything is retested, like scientific, any kind of study is done again, kind of to see if that holds true again. And if it doesn't, then you need to, rework on your theories and your hypotheses. So you need to really apply that to any kind of information now. And of course, if you come across information that you can't verify, you can't check, you can always reach out to fact checkers. There are a bunch of us out there. I'm going to give our tip line number out there as well. You can always reach out to us, and there are all of us just sitting and waiting for these messages to see how to really help you. And of course, talk to your children, talk to your parents, spouse, uncles, aunts, friends, cousins, talk to everyone. Especially if someone sends you something which is questionable, don't let it slide. If you are in talking terms to this person, always reach out, and always try to explain that not everything you receive is kind of reliable. And the most common reason people give for sharing fake news is that they received it from someone who reliable. But this person did not create this news. This is not this person's information giving it to you. This person also received it from someone, and you don't know who exactly generated, who started this, where this originates from. And that person, that entity is not reliable. It comes from very far away. Someone sitting in this little garage, just writing these kind of messages and sending it out, and probably being paid for it. So these people are not reliable. So basically, don't trust these kind of messages, and always reach out to your close ones to tell them about it. Another important thing is, because I spoke about political micro-targeting, is protecting your data. A lot of people say, I have nothing to hide. When we talk about, your privacy, especially online privacy. Well, you wouldn't have the government or your local authorities put cameras in your bedroom, would you? So you wouldn't want them to see your private conversations either. You wouldn't want them to see everything you do online, because all of this information can actually be used against you in really bad ways, to manipulate you in ways that you don't even know. So be very, very careful of what you put on social media. Don't put something very private that can be used against you. Always try to use VPN. It's something that it's a new kind of thing, and we should start using it now, especially in India as well. I mean, VPN really protects you, and it keeps your data secure. So especially use a VPN service that encrypts your data, so that's always good. And be mindful, because I mean, going back to my first point, all of this is happening because of this information overdose or overload that's happening, and that's why it's so hard for us to figure out, sort the right ones from the wrong ones. So be mindful. So what you can do for this mindfulness is, of course, turning off your phones and laptops before sleeping. Maybe give yourself 1.5 hours before and after sleeping. And you must be asking what this has to do with fake news. A lot, actually. Just not dirtying your sleep time with these screens and phones and laptops actually helps you a lot in your daytime. If you get good night's sleep, then in the daytime you'll be a lot more capable of handling this information. So cut down. Your mind is always trying to get more and more information. You need to train your mind to slow down on it sometimes, because this is the trap, right? In this craving for more information is where you fall into this trap of really needing to share fake news. So you need to really slow down right there. So turn off your phones and laptops, and try to maybe meditate, try to read a book, do things that people used to do back in the days, like maybe go out for a walk, talk to your family, talk to your friends, but just like try to stay off the screen, because we are kind of addicted to it, and it is causing a lot of trouble, things that we're not able to see actually in real life, or in real time, I would say. So to really understand this, you need to take a step back and reevaluate your habits, especially when it comes to your phones and computers. So yeah, and if things get too overwhelming, always consult a therapist. It's a taboo in India, and not everybody does this, but it is actually great, and it can actually help you if you find things too confusing, or if you don't know how to go about your life, because you find like something terrible is happening because of all the media, all the information that you have consumed from your phone. And it does happen, actually. These kind of depression or anxiety do happen. So please do consult a therapist if you find it very overwhelming. And with that, I'm going to end my talk. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Archis. That was a pretty insightful talk. I think a couple of things that really, like takeaways as I see is, one is you stressed on the importance of questioning, and more so question when things appear believable, and also not to keep quiet, in case if you find something to be, and something that needs to be called out as not being true. So I think these are two very important things that I take away, apart from some of the things that people can do to help the fact checkers. So thanks for that nice introduction. Your talk. And so now we'll move on to the third bit. Anand, do we have the video of Bageshree? Okay. In the meantime, I just want to share with our audience that we did have a third panelist representing the print media. She's Bageshree Subanna, who is the chief of bureau for the state of Karnataka with the Hindu. Unfortunately, she had some staff, who tested COVID positive, and hence there was some work that she had to urgently attend to, and that's the reason why she could not make it. It was a pretty unexpected event that happened, so she's unable to join us. So if she can share some video, we would like to play it here, but I'm just checking with our admin if there is something like that. Anand, anything you have? so far? Or we could go with the Q&A and then come back when you get the video. Okay, I get the message that we are to receive something. So let's move to the questions. So thanks to both the panelists for that perspective. There are few questions that we have on the screen, as well as people who have mentioned some questions ahead of the call. So the first question that I have with me is on the kind of work that the fact checkers do. Archis, so the question is, there is a people have some way to identify if some information is true or false based on text search. But what's really more popular these days is the images or the videos that are sent. So how is it that we can ascertain something to be fact or not if it's an image or a video? What do you think we can do? Is there a question from one of our audiences?
Okay. So the best thing to do in that case would be to do something called a reverse image search. If you go to Google Images, there are two ways of searching. One is you enter a text and you search for an image. The other way is use the little image sign. You can upload an image, and then what it does is it will give you results every time that image was uploaded previously. So what happens is if somebody says this image is from a specific place, and if you put it on reverse image search, you might be able to find where this image was previously posted and whether it was shared with a different context. And usually you can find out, if this image comes with maybe a news article or some kind of description where you can see the real context where it actually is from. So reverse image search is maybe one of the most basic tools you can use. There's Google and there's Yandex, yandex.com, Yandex. These two tools are like very useful for us fact checkers. For videos as well, same thing. You take a screenshot of one of the frames which you think is very important, like a keyframe, and then you run it through reverse image search. And again, if you read enough of our fact checks, you'll know that this is like the part and parcel of what we do. This is most of our fact checks basically is done through this. Of course, we also do like things like calling up the police to confirm and verify certain things. But this will already give you like a kind of a go ahead in terms of verifying images and videos. So yeah, reverse image search is the way to go.
Oh, thank you. There is also this technique of breaking a video into its constant images, right? Like there are frames that we see in videos and that can be broken into images, and then we can do those image search. Right? So is that a technique that's okay? Yeah. So there are a few more questions on that. So let me go back. So this can be taken by both the panelists. So the question is, we can make we can bust unscientific claims which are made by people who like our friends or people who we know. But if the claims are coming from people like Mr. Bagla spoke about the initiatives of the government on how to promote scientific communication. So at the same time, if there are claims that are made by people in power, how can truth be reported, and what you think that is possible to be done? Is the question from one of our audience here. Anyone can take the question.
Can I?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Any false claim made by anybody can easily be debunked. And the more powerful the person is, or let's say powerful by the way of the office they hold. So if it's the minister, the prime minister, the chief minister, the president of America, or the president of Russia, when they make these false claims, or if they spread disinformation, people come down very heavily on them. They are far more fact checked, both by journalists and also by people like Archis. So somewhere along the line, see, rumors and disinformation have limited life. The old dictum, truth prevails, truth certainly moves slower than falsehood, but then truth does prevail. So if it's a person in power who has made something wrong, and we've seen sometimes ministers making very, very odd claims, and they have been shown the mirror and they have been told what is right or wrong. So it really makes no difference. The trouble comes not so much from mainline media, but trouble comes from what is now called the WhatsApp University. The WhatsApp University an is kind of an omnipresent medium of information, which is literally one on one between people, and that is very hard to correct. And I'm sure Archis can add to that, because WhatsApp is a very complex way of communicating, because it's literally one on one, and it's between individuals, literally from that perspective. So any falsehood which is traveling there, it doesn't come out into the public domain as other claims made by powerful people. So that is very hard to correct.
Definitely. I mean, WhatsApp was started off as something very simple, but it has turned into something else completely, and it has been used for things that even the makers of this technology didn't expect. Some of the things, though, I would say that I disagree with. One is that truth prevails. This I hope it was the truth, but what we have seen is that fake news is a lot more viral than fact checks. Our fact checks never see the kind of virality and is never shared as much as fake news. And it is basically the same reason, as I said, confirmation bias, because fact checks are not really nice to share. Like one thing is that you don't want to correct people. Like, it's not very common to correct people. Sometimes it's considered as rude, or sometimes, it's just you won't just bother to do that. So that's why, even when, and sometimes people just don't care. And so many times it has happened that somebody posts a fake news. Like, for example, recently somebody shared an image of Aditya Thackeray with Disha Patani in a car. And I remember, because I was doing that story, I was checking comments and all. And the claim was that this is Riya Chakrabarti, who was also in the news. And somebody commented saying, oh, by the way, this is not actually Riya Chakrabarti, it's Disha Patani. And the person responded saying, I know, but that's not the point. This is really weird, because you are making a false claim here, and if you think that's not the point, it's not a big deal, then that's a big problem. And if this is the general mentality, that's something we need to address. So let's go back to the issue of people in power, or basically saying maybe the authority is making a claim that is not true. And it has happened during the pandemic. For example, one very dangerous one would be the claim around arsenic album, which is a homeopathic medication. And I mean, this is a very touchy topic, and way back in March, the government released the statement saying that this can help prevent coronavirus. And a lot of people were saying, no, wait, don't say that, because what we saw is people who started taking it thinking that it actually helps prevent, and they stopped taking other precautions. And I know of cases where people took arsenic album believing that it would actually prevent them from getting coronavirus, and they died. They got coronavirus and they died because they attended functions, they did everything that they were not supposed to, they didn't do any social distancing because they believed it. And so many governments, like Telangana government, distributed arsenic album in huge amounts. So when the authorities do these kind of things, there should always be some kind of institution, there should always be some entity to check this. In the United States, you have the CDC, which strongly comes down hard on Donald Trump every time he makes a false claim. You have US tech companies like Twitter, who do at least this much by like taking down any bad video that Donald Trump shared, any unverified video. In India, sadly, we don't have that. If someone from the government, if a politician or someone from the cabinet, or somebody else in power says something, we don't have an institution that's going to come down hard on them, especially. And ICMR wouldn't do that. For example, I've never seen ICMR go against the government and say, oh wait, hold on, don't say that yet. The only time it did something was when the coronal thing happened with Patanjali, that ICMR distanced themselves from that. But otherwise, I haven't really seen that. So So for this to happen, we need to have good institutions. We need to have this questioning habit that I talked about. We need to have it reach really, really to the top. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to take these people, have these people accountable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
At this stage, let me add something. This is something which I have said on many fora. Uh, See, I don't think the all the points which Archis mentioned, they would not fall in the category of news. A fake news is something, or let me say, news is what is generated by journalists who have credible stature and who report for regular media, and there are credible sources. A lot of what is happening is actually disinformation. So please, please differentiate between fake news and disinformation. Most of what we
Yes,
are
there
talking
is.
about actually fake is disinformation that is motivated with a certain purpose, and that is done by specific individuals to spread specific falsehoods. Journalists don't do disinformation. Journalists, by and large, don't disseminate fake news. Let's correct that once and for all.
I would
Yes.
say though, in during this time, sorry, can I add a point to that, Satish? Or
Yeah, please go ahead, Archis. Go ahead, Archis, please. Yeah.
yeah.
Take your time.
It's just that during the pandemic, what we have seen is so between January to April, uh, among all the COVID-19 related fact checks that we saw that 4% or even more, around 5% of our stories were actually misinformation that was spread by the mainstream media. We are talking about Z, we are talking about ANI, we are talking about PTI and IANS. And these are big names. These are nowhere small names. ANI is a big name. ANI came so many times in our, in our workflow because we saw something which just didn't go right, and then we found out. We called the police. There was a police quote, and we called the police, and the police completely rejected that, denied that they made such a quote. We called up ANI, and ANI just said, "Oh, it happens. Mistakes happen." You can't have such a big mistake, and the mistake was really big, and they added a word that just changed the entire news. So we did see, and basically this ecosystem is so big that it is spilling out of this dark dungeon where it was spaced, where it was basically like WhatsApp University, and it's coming onto the public domain. And we are now seeing public figures and mainstream media spreading fake news. I'll tell you,
Yeah.
another name is TV9 Bharatvarsh did this whole segment around a new virus in tomato. And if you look at the segment, it'll feel like the apocalypse is coming. Like this new virus in tomatoes are going to kill and wipe out the entire human population. We did a little fact check and we found that it has nothing to do with, like, it's not a transmittable virus. It's just something that's making the crops go bad and ripe early. And it was really horrible. And they never basically put out a correction or an apology saying that, sorry, we put this out, it was wrong. And they'll just take it out. This is what Z did with one of the stories that we corrected or fact checked. Was they changed the entire story after a fact check or after I called them up, and they didn't put any correction. Thankfully, we archived those old pages and posts so we could still hold them accountable. So this is a problem that is really spilling over to the mainstream, and it's scary. It's very scary, I would
Yes.
say.
Yeah, I think it brings me to the next question. These are very hard-hitting points, I would say. And I do remember a case where there was a Solbhadra, place in UP where there were gold mines, which was reported in the mainstream media, and then it was retracted a day later when the
Yeah.
GSA director came and gave a statement to the contrary. So I do remember this. So the question that's coming up here from one of the audience is that, as you rightly pointed out, both of you, that the fake news industry, and the audience, the person calls it fake news industry, and the point is that there are IT cells of different dispensations which are actually contributing a great deal because of the network that they've built and so on. So the question is there any law in the country today, a legal framework in which this can be handled, or is it left to people like you, who are doing some good work with the different forms of media? So that's a question that's being asked.
Should I
I
go?
mean, both of you take it. Yeah, please go ahead. And Mr. Bagla can add.
So I would say that our current laws on cybercrime are not equipped to handle this because it's a very new phenomenon, to be honest. And of course, the law has to adapt to that. There needs to be changes made. That will happen later, I guess. What's happening is there are people like us, fact checkers, right now who are checking this. There are researchers who are tracking this. There are communication scientists, political scientists who are tracking this all over the world. And they have taken a deep and keen interest in the case of India, along with cases like United States. And United States and India are really like two big kind of subjects for these kind of studies. So I would say that as someone who actually tracks these IT cells, I would say that it's really formidable because compared to us, they're a lot more resourceful and they have a lot more money to do these kind of operations. And we are also we are also questioning the kind of relationship that they're building with tech companies. So once you get into power, some kind of either in the state or in the center, you do have some kind of dealings with tech companies, and we don't know where it's going and how much these tech companies are agreeing to give them, like in terms of data, in terms of metrics, because we don't get much as even partners. We don't get much, but if they actually start getting more and more metrics on users, then the kind of micro targeting, again, something I mentioned before, the kind of micro targeting they'll put on you is going to be formidable. It's going to be like they're going to create individual campaigns that is tailored just for you. You're going to see the kind of messages that no one else is going to see, because it takes into account your personality, your behavior, your beliefs, and everything else that's around you, basically, that makes you what you are. And even things that you don't even know about yourself, because it's a collection of a whole range of data over the years, and the kind of analysis they do, even you don't have that data, so even you don't know these things about yourself. So these kind of campaigns are so powerful that you will fall prey to it. You will be influenced and manipulated by it without even knowing. I mean, if you want to know more about it, go to Netflix, watch this documentary called The Great Hack. They did a good
Yes,
job of bringing together all these views on what
absolutely.
Cambridge Analytica really did. They bring out all the whistleblowers as well, and to really show how crazy, how dangerous this actually is, and what it actually means for future elections, or the future political participation of citizens. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Mr. Bagla?
No, I really don't want to add anything, but see, I am not somebody who has given up. I'm not somebody who believes that the diversity of the media in India, the diversity of opinions in India, you cannot prevail on everybody. Whatever people may say, and I know, Satish, you work with a tech company. Uh,
Yeah.
Tech companies may do whatever they feel like, but Indians are an amazingly opinionated lot. They argue, they have sharp opinions, and they don't always believe what comes to them. So and the
Yeah.
plurality of the media which exists is so diverse in so many different languages, so many different media, and you can't win over. There is always going to be somebody who's going to be able to shine the light and bring truth to the fore. So, so
Yeah.
I,
In fact,
I'm not giving up very easily and believing that India's democracy is going to die because Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the likes of those social media are making ingress in India. Certainly not.
yeah.
Indian democracy is far stronger and will withstand many of these new technologies and be able to do very well in times to come.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that point, sir, because I do believe that we have a very strong, a set of people who are generally very focused on getting evidence. There is, of course, this menace of unscientific claims and beliefs, but at the same time, there's also a growing tribe of people who value data, who value information, who value evidence. So that's again a good thing that we see in the recent times. So in fact, that there is I take a slight tack. There is a lot of people who are very much concerned. I can see in the comments and the questions I'm getting on WhatsApp that on fake news and misinformation seems to be a very worrying part for many of our audience here. But before I get there, there is a comment that I see from one of the audience, Prabir Sinha, who says that he's actually pretty happy with what modern science has done. So he says that miracles are not associated with science. It takes time to find a cure. This is in the context of COVID-19 pandemic vaccine. What has been already achieved in the last few months about knowledge about the virus is awesome. So that's a comment. It's not a question, but that's a comment from an audience. So in fact, with that, I'll just move on to the next question, which is from Keepti. So what she's asking is, can journalism evolve a new framework for reporting fake news? I mean, so far it's been more on the social media that we see, but is there some way that the electronic media, more importantly, the TV and the visual media, as well as the print media, can be involved in this great initiative? Is the question.
Mr. Bagla?
Because that's where it's more and more influential. Possibly, as even Archis pointed out, there's a great amount of misinformation or maybe disinformation, as you said, which I can't comment, but it could be another reason. So, how can the mainstream media also can take part in this initiative? Is the question.
Do you want me to come in?
Please go ahead.
See, the mainstream media does its job, and there are filters at every stage. I have been part of print, I have been part of television, I have been part of major photography efforts, and I also do a lot of social media. In mainstream media, there are several filters. No story can go directly on air unless there is a news editor, unless there is a top editor, and unless there is a person who's had a look at it. So there are more than one filters which are there in mainstream media, which make sure that things go by and large right. That does not mean that things can't go wrong. Uh, I, I have a long career. I can't say that everything I have reported has always been bang on, because you are reporting slices of time as they are correct at that moment. The information changes as time goes on, so some of the truth may change. So, as mainstream media, we try and report that slice of time and that slice of truth as objectively as we can. And I would say for most of the mainstream media that still holds true. And don't forget, today, not just the audience, there are people like Archis and there are other fact checkers who come down fairly heavily when you make mistakes. And today, when I was doing live television, if something by mistake a word came out wrong, even my studio was on the second floor, and if I had to come down a floor below to the newsroom, even before I could come down, messages would have come to my boss saying, this is something which Pallava has said is wrong. So today, fact checking is happening literally live and online. So efforts are made and efforts are corrected. So have faith and trust in the mainstream media. There are many filters there. And as far as laws go, I think it's a whole lot of different discussion we can go into, how the mainstream media is answerable at several stages, be it in courts, be it the Press Council of India, be it to your editor, be it letter to the editor, and today on social media. The answerability is very strong.
Okay. So, in fact, that I can connect to the next question that I have. It seems that many of our audiences are not really for laws to regulate media because they stand for the freedom of expression in the media. But at the same time, the question that's coming up is that have we made progress in terms of self-regulation of the media? So we have bodies that are calling for self-regulation to disseminate valid information. So have we really made some progress? Is there some light that you can throw? Is the question.
Archis, do you want to go with it?
Sure, I can go with it. I mean, also connecting with the previous answer, I would say that it's a question where the answer is a part of a debate, and you can't give a definite answer. As you said, if you start a regulatory body, then they have this worry of stifling, the media's voice. Then
Right.
again, if you don't put this, if you don't bring some kind of regulation, then the media is there's no accountability for the media, which is also wrong. You need to have accountability in all these levels. So basically, I think right now, as you know, the media, especially news channels, follow this whole TRP model, and it's the people who can hold these media channels accountable, given how much you view them. I think even if you make a complaint against a channel, how much the law will take action against that channel is of course very subjective. It all depends on a lot of factors, and the truth is hardly like the major factor here. But I would say that creation of an ombudsman, I mean, these are channels, or these media companies should take these initiatives by themselves, of having an ombudsman or a team of ombudsman who would really listen to all the viewers have to say, and if there are complaints that they would take seriously. And this is something they should do it very openly and transparently, to show that they are part of this initiative. And if all these big media houses can take these kind of initiatives and come together and say that, okay, we are really going to take a step in correcting all our mistakes, then I think that's a good sign. That would be great for all the followers, all the viewers, to have some faith. Okay, at least we know that if they go wrong, we can take these kind of steps. There's someone waiting to listen to us and take action. Right now, that isn't there. Maybe some channels do that, maybe some newspapers do that, but it's not really practiced a lot. I have heard anchors on primetime TV say things like, I don't care about the ethics of journalism and I don't care about the rule of law. I don't want to name this person, but these are the things that are said, and the kind of discussions that follow are really horrible. And for people watching it intently and trying to get any information out of it, I wouldn't I don't have good hopes for. So again, like I'm bringing a very dark view to this, I know, but again, the whole point is to be very careful in what you trust, and it's okay to not have full faith in everything. Because okay, some media channels are making efforts in correcting fake news, especially during the pandemic. We know that NDTV, we have a little tie-up where we do this little fact check show and mythbuster segment, and other media channels and their websites as well, they have started fact checking as well, and they've introduced it. India Today has, Times have. So basically, this is something that is actually happening. This evolution is happening, and fact checking is becoming a part of journalism and mainstream media. So yeah,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
my answer.
Thanks, Archis. I think we have many more questions, but I don't think we might be able to have the time to ask all the questions. And if something remains, I would definitely, seek excuse from the audience, and we'll try to see if there is a way to come back to you at a later point in time. But however, now the question that's coming up is, again, there is an audience here who is, well, agreeing with the optimism that is spelled out by Mr. Bagla. The question is again on, what is it that that's being done, or anything that's undertaken for, let's say, the kind of misinformation that's happening with these astrology shows, the numerology, or the magnetotherapy, things like that that we see on a daily basis, especially in the television channels. So, what kind of awakening or some churning that's happening? Is there something that we can hope that some things will improve, and sharing the optimism that you have? That's a question.
Very straightforward. Don't watch it. It will not come again and again. End of story. The power lies in the remote, and the power lies in your hand. Don't watch something which is not scientific. Don't watch something which is obviously giving you information like the kind which Archis is saying. If you don't watch it, they will automatically go off air. End of story. The
I
power
totally agree.
lies in individuals. The
Yes.
power lies with people. Power lies in the hands who press that button on that electronic voting machine. So the power lies in each individual person's hand. And I have great faith in our people's power and in that finger which presses the remote and the finger which presses the electronic voting machine.
Okay, well said. So there is now going from these sponsored programs. There is a question on the news. The question is, uh, there is a audience who is asking a question that there have been situations where even in the mainstream electronic media there have been news items which air videos which are tagged as not verified, but the anchor is still reporting a certain viewpoint out of an unverified video. So does this really account for journalistic ethics, or is it some practice that we should have some way to contain? Is the question, because this is news, not really some sponsored program.
Can I come in here?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, has been a problem for us fact checkers for a while in fact checking the media. Is that sometimes we see something like this and they put not verified content, and we can't really fact check it because they're saying it that it's not verified. But the problem here is in terms of ethics, it's really at the borderline where it is questionable. You can question it, and it's not wrong to question that whether it's right or wrong. As in, if you are going about reporting on something and you don't even know whether this represents reality, then you could be doing some wrong, some harm to people, because people, you must realize that people, when they see visuals, they create a lot of these perceptions in their head, or it forces their or it kind of feeds their pre-existing beliefs very strongly. So if this is not real, then you're really pushing their perception towards something that is not real, basically, that is fake, based on something that is fake. And with these kind of false perceptions in mind, if people go to the voting booth, then their decision will actually be influenced by things that are not true. And it will really kind of impede in their method of decision making, in these kind of things, in choosing what to watch. As he said, always choose well of what to watch. In this decision should be made in very clear mind. If you see these kind of news channels, and if they're putting out things that are not verified, then it's up to you to decide whether to watch it or not. Maybe switch to a different channel, find a better channel to watch where they put actually verified imagery and they don't resort to these kind of things. There isn't lack of channels, of course. No matter which language you watch it in, there'll be multiple channels to watch, to select from. So yes, it is a questionable thing. It is something we question in our newsroom among fact checkers, and it's not wrong that you raised this question. It's a legit one.
Okay. So yeah, that's pretty insightful. So the other question that I'm getting here is that while you did mention about Archis, you mentioned about calling out fake news when one exists, right? So the question is, some of them are concerned with sensitive issues, things that people have faith in, maybe or may not be a factual basis, but certainly there is a lot of faith and emotion associated. So how is it that a fact check or calling out information can happen in such a situation, and it can end up disturbing someone's emotion? So how do you handle that is the question.
That is a very sensitive, obviously sensitive matter, especially when you're fact checking something that relates to faith. So fact checking only works with specific claims. When you make a claim and you put it out as fact, and you are totally allowed to explain that, okay, listen, what this is your belief, this is your faith, and there is no evidence for it, and just accept it how it is. It's okay. Like, a lot of people believe in things that they don't have evidence for. But they shouldn't call it out as fact, but they can totally accept it as their faith, because faith and fact are two different things. You can have faith in things that have not been proved factual, and it happens very often actually in day-to-day lives. So yes, it is a sensitive topic, especially when people can overreact or react negatively to these kind of comments. So yes, I mean, if it's someone who's close to you, maybe do it in a more patient manner. Explain, start from the basics. Start from science. If this person is educated, start from some basic evidence. Start talking about evidences, scientific evidences. There's nothing to prove this to be right. So maybe let's not talk about it as a fact. You can talk about this as your opinion, which is fine. and you can talk, and opinions are okay. You can have different opinions and it can vary. I can have an opinion differing from you, but we can't say that my fact is different from yours. That cannot happen. And if that is happening, then there's something wrong with this discussion. We need to fix a few basics in the discussion. Facts are something that is built upon with evidence, and if you don't have the evidence to support it, then it's not a fact. That's simply how it is. And I think if you lead a discussion in that manner, in a very rational manner, I think it should be fine.
Okay, great, Archis. So, I see another question that's coming up. By the way, I've seen some comments from the audience saying it has been a very informative discussion so far. So, thanks to both of you for making it so, informative. So the question that's coming up is, um, we do have such instances, right? As you both mentioned, there are cases where people who are anchors or news reporters actually making false claims, which get busted later. So the question coming out here is that, is it something that's specific to that anchor at an individual level, or is there something larger at stake or larger at play here? Is there some sort of a remote control that sort of creates the narrative for a given media house, media channel, etc.? So that's a question that's coming up. Loaded question, but if any comments there.
Mr. Bagla, you wanna come in here?
But what can I say? Sometimes the nation wants to know what is the truth, and the truth will be told. End of story. Nothing else, nothing more. The nation wants to know the truth.
Okay, that's a short answer. So there is another question. Yeah, you Archis, you want to go?
You got everything what I needed to say.
Yeah. I mean, I just mentioned something Mr. Bagla said earlier. The power is in your hands as a viewer. And these news channels and all, they follow this TRP model. So if you're giving them a lot of ratings by watching their channel again and again, they will keep following these models and push out these kind of opinions as they'll throw these opinions as facts at you, and try to make a big deal, put out sensational items. So really, if you don't want them to do that, just stop watching their channel. Simple.
Yeah. So maybe I'll maybe end with the last question here. I have more, but I think we're running out of time, so I'm conscious of your time as well. Not sure if it's easy to answer this question, but are there some ways in which we can find which news channel is trustworthy? Okay, so that's from an audience, Pushpak Bhatt. So he's asking, is there something to sort of guideline to sort of assess which is a trustworthy news channel?
Mr. Bagla, you want to comment?
Not really, because see, this is very individual choices, and people have to exercise that choices based on their own levels of trust in whatever media organization they trust. And that is how it is. And trust, and please trust me. I have been in this business for now 30 plus years. People who spread disinformation don't last long. They get knocked out sooner than later. So look at people who have survived for long, and the trustworthy sources automatically emerge. End of story.
Great. Please. Yeah.
I'll just add on. One little process that I do personally is when you're looking at a news segment, try to see how much of reporting has been done, how much facts are being reported, and how much opinions are being said. A lot of the times, you hear a lot about opinions. Iska matlab ye hai, iska matlab wo hai. Those are opinions. If someone's saying, okay, there's a ground reporter and he's saying, oh, this is what happened, we have a person who's saying this, a person who's saying this, these are the witness accounts. These are reporting. Okay, so the more reporting is being done, the more trustworthy it is. And the more facts are being, the more opinions are being said, the less and less trustworthy it gets, at least for me personally. So maybe that's something you could think about.
Okay. So that's been I would say, not just informative, but a pretty exciting, discussion with many perspectives. I can see the same opinion expressed by the audience in the comments. Once again, I thank both of you. We are running out of time. So any further questions, we will hopefully be in touch with you. And if there is a way that we can ask you and then come back and then post the answers here, we would be glad to do that. So I once again thank both our panelists for making time. And this is a new medium that we are trying out, these webinars and these apps. And we are also learning in the process. We have had some difficulties. Yeah, please, Mr. Bagla.
But I don't want to leave the audience feeling pessimistic.
Yeah, exactly. I was coming to that.
Optimism.
Absolutely.
Things are going right. Things will improve. Things will be better. If you look at it, the plurality and the diversity of the mediums will only increase when you see more internet penetration, and that will help and empower the democracy. So please don't feel sullen or crestfallen, or feel that things are going to end. No, the pandemic is also going to end. We will also live to tell a tale, and
Yeah.
the country will also survive. We have survived for 5,000 years. We will survive even longer.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts from Archis before I wind up the session?
Yes, definitely. And yes, it's true that we should accept that certain things have gone wrong, and only once we accept it, we can make it better. But in this process, we need to be optimistic. We can't go down and we can't break down and give up, because if you give up, then it's the end, right? So you have to, in this fight for truth, because it's really hard sometimes for you to make out, as you said, from the discussions it gets. From what I get is that people find it difficult to now tell what's real and wrong, because they spend a lot of time on their phones and they're seeing all these messages. So don't give up, and always bring this questioning attitude. It's a good thing. It's a good behavior to question information, because only then you can be pointed towards the right information, even if it comes from a very trusted source. Check if all the right things, if you can point out if the reporting is done correctly, what's the source and all. And this behavior itself will make it a lot better, for you to it'll increase your capabilities of receiving and accepting information in the right way. And in all of this, always try to kind of stay together with your community, with the people you like. Never forget that the world on your phone is not the end. It's actually the world around you that's more important. And if you can do that, if you can go back to the books, read a bit of newspaper, and stay off the screen a little bit, and look at life outside this technology, and remember what it's like, then actually it will be a lot better.
Great words, to yeah, yeah, and that's a nice, setting for us to conclude this session. And I do share the sense of optimism that both of you have exuded here. While at the same time identifying the mistakes that we have made and taking measures to correct them and then move in the right direction, and also exploring various other ways of social bonding, which really helps us to be a very healthy society. So great thoughts. With that, I conclude this session, and I once again thank our audience for a very active participation. And I'm glad to say that today, being 9th of August, also happens to be the day when the Quit India movement, was initiated. So it coincides with that, and it's the time to say quit misinformation and quit disinformation out of India. So that's a nice way to end. And there are 16 webinars that are happening today in 16 states while we speak, both in English as well as in the regional languages, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, Hindi, etc. So let's keep in touch, and let's move forward to the next phase of this movement. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to the panelists and our audience who have been good supporters of the India March for Science initiative. Let's stay in touch. See you.
Thank you.